Well, hello, Kepler families, teachers. Welcome to another live. You can already tell from the setting that this is a special live. Not many of them happen in person. A few have. We do have some teachers here in town. One of the teachers we have in town is my wife, Kimberly Swait. Welcome, Kimberly.
Thank you, Joffrey.
So Kimberly is teaching 2 art classes this fall. She's teaching a general studio art course, which is a full credit and lasts all year. And she's teaching observational drawing 1 in the fall. There's also a spring sequel, advanced observational drawing.
That's right.
Nice. So we're going to get into details about those classes. You know, I think the idea of doing a practical arts class, visual arts class online, may be interesting to a lot of you. It's interesting and exciting to us as well. So we're going to explore plenty of that. But first, let the people know who you are.
Okay.
Besides being my wife and an art teacher.
Okay. So my name is Kimberly Swait, and I have 5 kids with Joffrey. And most of them are in high school now or middle school. My youngest is 7, my oldest is 17. And I have taught art in multiple places, ran all kinds of different classes.
But this is the first time you're teaching online.
It's the first time I'm teaching art online, so that's going to be different and interesting.
May I ask you to project magnificently through the diaphragm? Tell us about your arts background. What's your formation?
Formation.
What's your education?
Okay. All right. So in middle school, I started an arts program that's an art magnet program with the public school. I had 3 extra art classes from all the way through middle school and high school. And then I went on to the University of Florida and got my Bachelor of Fine Arts in painting particularly. During that time, I did a lot of different art classes. So I've taken...
Magna cum laude, by the way, at UF.
I've taken...
It was a politically controversial one, too. Very exciting.
Will you stop it? So I took pottery. I've done painting, printmaking, drawing. I've done wood carving. I've done all kinds of stuff. Chalk drawings on sidewalks. I've done all kinds of things.
And that kind of touches on the general studio art class,
yes.
Because you'll be, there. It's a class where you get to learn the basics of a whole bunch of different art forms.
Right. The general studio class is a lot more about experimenting. So there's a lot more experimenting with different materials, getting to try a little bit of painting, trying a little bit of drawing, a little bit of printmaking, a little bit of sculpture, but not necessarily spending as much time mastering each of those things. Just trying them out, seeing what is exciting to you. In the midst of that, you'll still learn basics of art. So learning the elements of art, like line, shape, color, form, those things will be included in there, but it's not you'll get to master a media particularly. You'll have all different mediums.
It's a dabbling course, an in-depth dabble course.
Yeah, and I love to experiment with mixed media, so that's really fun.
Right. It's actually a lot of your current work as an artist is in mixed media. So I'd love to hear about, as if I did not know, your journey as an artist, because you didn't... you're not an art teacher by vocation. You teach art, but you're an artist by vocation.
Right. So I was a painter. I worked in acrylics and in oil painting. And then I had 5 children and found it very difficult to do painting with 5 children around. So I started sewing because you can really break sewing down in easier increments. And then when the kids started getting older, I started collaging the fabric on canvas and then painting on the fabric and doing fabric collage paintings. So it was this fun sort of transition while I was being mom with little ones to back to painting, but with a little bit of a twist to
Those
it.
are some of my favorite pieces. You can check out her artwork at kimberlyswait.com. kimberlyswait.com. And so, she'll do, say, goldfish or a mermaid, all in fabric, with the water in the background being in fabric, the plants being in fabric, and then she paints over it. And I don't think I'm biased when I say it's an amazing effect. You impressed me so much, baby.
Thanks, honey.
All right, well, let's talk about these 2 courses then. I know we already kind of hit a little bit on the general studio art class. But let's start with observational drawing 1.
Right.
Why would my kid take this class, and what does the class consist of?
So this is for any child who's interested in really studying traditional art and drawing. This will help them to start looking around and seeing things in the elements of art so that they can translate that onto paper. So for instance, you can look at a tree outside and decide what lines to make in order to create that tree on paper. I did not call it life drawing, which is the normal name for a course like this, because I also thought there might be some drawing from photographs or things like that. It just depends. But that way you're still just drawing from what you see. So this one will be a pretty traditional type art class where you're really just learning to use pencils mostly, either charcoal or ebony pencils, which is just a graphite pencil, and then moving to some colored pencils and things like that. But it's really just mastering that drawing with the pencil. This way, if you master the drawing with the pencil, it's pretty easy to start sliding into things like painting, because it's the same. It's just a wet material. So it's just kind of getting used to the medium change. But it helps you to go ahead and see things from an art perspective, put them on paper, and then you can start messing around with your media later if you start feeling really comfortable with the mastery of your skills.
So this is a course that's not just for the person who's interested in becoming a good drawer, but of course for anyone interested in two-dimensional art.
Right. It's very foundational, even three-dimensional in some ways, because you're creating illusions of form, but it really helps you when you start even making real form, three-dimensional forms. So I really love this as a foundational course for any art classes, but this one is really about having a little more mastery with and gaining a little more skill so that you can, communicate your ideas in other mediums too and stuff like that.
So, some of that, like talking about 3D and textures, is going to lead us into the general studio art course. But here in your description of the drawing course, you talk about the 7 elements of art.
Yes.
So, maybe kind of break that down for us a little bit.
Okay, so my favorite way of explaining it is it's like learning your alphabet in art. So you have to understand what you use to create illusions or forms. So you use line, shape, color, value, space, texture, and form. And when you know how to put those together, you start making, it's like what you use when you use letters to make words. You put those together in order to create illusions of things you see. So pictures and drawings and paintings and anything. So it's just like in music, when you have to learn notes, you have to start learning your shapes and learning how shapes interact with other shapes before you can really do a good job creating illusions.
So what's the structure of this class? What does a week in observational drawing look like for a student? Okay,
so there'll be a pre-recorded lecture and demo. So I'll explain some things, and then I'll try to do, for most of them, I'll do a drawing for them. And then on the next class, the next time we'll actually meet live on Fridays, and the student will, I'm actually working on where I think the camera will be looking at your drawing so that I can watch you draw. There might be some people having to put up their drawing for me to look at it once in a while as they work. But I mostly want to see your drawings, even though I'm sure you'll have beautiful faces. But, and then I'll be instructing you as you draw and correcting things and helping you see things a little more clearly. There's also going to be, in the demos, there's going to be some talk about how to set up a still life. They'll be very simplified still lives, things like put your shoes this way and that way, and I'll show you, and then have you do it at home with a white cloth under them and a lamp shining on them, or things like that. And then the students should already have that set up and start drawing by the time our class, start drawing when the class starts. And I'll instruct them, and then we'll have a short critique at the end of a class. So we'll look at all the drawings. We'll talk about what's good about some of the drawings, what's not so good about some of the drawings, what can improve. And then we'll have homework assignment. Every week they'll do a homework assignment in their sketchbooks.
Well, I love that there's a critique period, because, I don't think it's going to be overstepping to say that. Obviously, your feedback and your critiques are going to be the most valuable to the students. But there's a value in itself to having the students talk to each other and hearing these different voices and hearing that some people may like this but not that, and just getting those different angles. And it's even an important skill to learn as an artist,
right?
Because one is often around artists who just can't bring themselves to say a bad thing or a negative thing or a constructive thing, right. Perhaps because they're afraid they'll get it themselves. But if our goal is to truly improve our techniques in order to become thoroughgoing artists, then we need that back and forth.
Well, yeah, and there's definitely a maturity in understanding how to look at someone else's drawing and say, well, I think you need to work on the line over here or whatever.
Right.
So there's a grace period for that. There's a lot more understanding how to just look at things and even see the good things sometimes in drawing. Right. So we'll talk about that, and I'll help them through that part. And it is an important part of art is to be able to look at other art and see what they're doing and how, if it's going in a good direction or not going in a good direction.
So, most Kepler classes have recitation periods that are an hour and a half, and the recitation is the time that is truly interactive with the teacher. There'll be a lecture period, which may or may not be pre-recorded, and then the recitation. And that's when you all sit around as if the teacher were C.S. Lewis, and you're in his office and he's smoking his pipe and you're having deep, enriching, meaningful conversation.
No pipe smoking in my class.
Right, well, so there's recitation, of course, in a Spanish class and in a drawing class. I like, though, that your recitation is 2 hours instead of an hour and a half. Because it gives time for the students to really, because they'll be doing their work in the recitation.
Right. And I mean, I would easily have studio classes that were 4 hours and things like that in school. So 2 hours is actually not an enormous amount of time to get a drawing done. So sometimes the students will actually be finishing their drawings after class. But a lot of the projects are going to be 2-week projects. So they'll just do half of it and then finish it for the next class kind of thing.
Now, before we move to the studio art course, this is not an art history class or an art criticism class. We're actually learning to do the thing itself. You mentioned traditional art. What did you mean by that when you said that? Is this something different than modern art? Do you use it differently when you're talking technically?
Yes. So a lot of art now is focused on conceptualization. So it's a lot more about what is your idea. Now, I don't think there's a huge problem with that. If you focus on the conceptualization before you have skills, your concept usually looks foolish, even if the idea is brilliant. Even if your idea is interesting, right? Yeah. So this is a skills-based class. So that's what I mean by the term traditional. So it really is just about, even though artwork we look at, we're not going to worry very much about any of the concepts that are being introduced in them. We're really focusing on how they make sense with line, shape, color, texture, form, those things. So that is the focus of the class. There's not a lot of, I'm not interested in how creative you are with your ideas. I'm more interested in how creative you are with the actual elements of art. So that's a different way of thinking about art a little bit for modern artists.
Right.
With the general art studio class, there'll be a little bit more conceptualization as far as you can get a little more creative with where you might go with like a sculpture or something. Like we might be making these little sculptures out of cardboard or things like that. It might, but it's still based on these elements of art. It's not conceptualized.
Kari Christofferson makes the comment that you're awesome at this. Wait, actually, she said so good. Maybe I think you're awesome at this. Kari thinks Kari. You're just so good. Didn't mean to put words in your mouth there, Kari. So good. You're so good at this. So let's actually talk about this general studio art course then. This is a whole other animal. I mean, obviously, it's also a skills class.
Right.
And this is a year-long course. Tell us about it.
Okay, so in this one, we're gonna start out with drawing and doing the same, very similar things to the observational drawing class, just to help students start observing the world with the elements of art. So I want students still to be able to look and say, if I put these lines together, I make this sort of shape or this form, and this is how you make an illusion of a form, like a hand or something. So I do want to.
Why did you pick a hand? Hands are so hard.
Hands are a normal beginning point. So so that is just the beginning point that we'll start with. But we're not going to spend a lot of time on mastering that in any way. We're going to just move on from there to kind of continue gaining those skills, but starting to mess around with media. So we'll move to things like oil pastels. We'll try out painting. We'll move to wet materials, and there'll be a lot more so we'll go into things like collaging. So like what I do is something like a collaging, and you could draw on top of it. And then we're even going to move into some three-dimensional elements. So
a little bit of sculpture for everybody.
I had a brilliant idea of making book nooks. You can look that up and see what that is, because it's really fun. I think I'm going to do it with my students. So
half of them are going to make a book nook of Diagon Alley.
They're not allowed to do Diagon Alley because you got to be original.
You have to be original. Right? Yes, good call.
And we are going to go into a little bit talking about communicating some ideas with with the skills you're gaining, right? So what are you trying to get across when you create this book nook? What illusion are you trying to create, like a snowy afternoon or whatever it might be? So we'll go a little bit into conceptualization and communicating with art, but it's mostly just trying to gain the skills and enjoy messing around with media. Experimentation is huge in art because it'll just make you better at getting across a lot of things.
Well, this course is all about experimentation, right? We used the word dabble earlier, right? So you get to fool around with a unique medium for a while, and decide which ones you want to pursue. Or when you go off to college, if you want to take, you can actually make some informed choices, or just educate yourself on YouTube on how to be a better printmaker, kind of already with a base of, I did a couple of printmaking projects. And I'm actually bringing up printmaking specifically because I think that's one of the coolest things you have going on in this class.
Yeah.
Maybe kind of describe to viewers what printmaking is and what it would look like in the context of this class.
So printmaking is being able to usually you create a plate and then you're able to keep printing it over and over again. But we are going to do two different kinds of printmaking, the two pretty basic ones. The first one is monoprinting, which is monoprinting because you actually only make one print. So it's original. So usually you can even think of the simple thing of when you would put paint in the middle of a piece of paper and then you would fold it in half and you make a butterfly. Okay, that's a monoprint, a really goofy monoprint, but a monoprint. So you can use like a piece of foam and you can make a print with paint and then you can print it on your paper and there's your monoprint. But each one is original. Then we're going to do a lino cut, which is where you take like this rubber piece of thing, sort of thing, and you carve out an image in it. You draw the image and then you carve it out very carefully with a lino cutter, which will go through safety with that, because it does have a sharp point.
No cutting yourselves.
And then you ink it and print it. So that'll be fun.
Yeah.
And some of what we're doing is things like we're going to use acrylic paint to ink it, even though there's special inks you use. But what's fun is you can take something like acrylic paint and you can make that into watercolors. You can use it for thicker painting, like impasto painting. You can use it for printmaking. So we're just going to experiment with these things. It won't be perfect. Like, if you use real ink for printmaking, it's better print. But this is a great way to experiment and just start trying it out, see what you think. If you love making those prints, you can go buy out the ink and then you still have your plate and you can ink it with that.
What you haven't done in years is etching and metal and then making prints. That's pretty cool. We're not doing that.
This class. That's a little bit more.
So Kelsey Smathers, I think she's come into the stream a little bit late, but I want to bring up her question, not only so she can hear it again, but because this is my favorite thing you do. So her question is, do you ever work with textiles?
Okay, so I do work with textiles. As far as I love to mess with fabric and do fabric collaging, and then I paint on top of the painting. So I collage onto a canvas and then I paint on it. And I do a lot of tearing and ripping and putting I really love texture in my paintings. But I don't do like weaving. I've never done weaving, or I've done a tiny bit of weaving on a really basic level, but I've never used like a loom or any of that sort of thing. So I think that answers the question.
Yep. You take other people's old textiles and turn them into beautiful stuff. And you can see a lot of that stuff at KimberlySwait.com. It's the third time I've plugged your website. Man, I'm good.
And I'm really hoping the students are going to experiment a lot in their sketchbooks. When I was in school, I used pine needles and sand and you name it. It was glued on and painted over. And so I'm really hoping the students are going to learn to explore all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Yeah, it's really fun.
Well, we appreciate everyone's participation and asking questions about these art classes. I think they're going to be a ton of fun for the students. And, education obviously is not just about fun, but when you can combine fun with real maturation, because, honestly, one of the things that this class will do for a lot of students, and, many other Kepler classes provide this as well. You have to make a speech in public. You have to do things in front of other students. That is something that every young person needs, but particularly homeschoolers. So, while you're dabbling and while you're having fun and you're like, ooh, I get to do that. I get to do a super advanced version of something I did in kindergarten when I folded the paper and I had a butterfly.
Right.
But then it's going to be evaluated.
Right.
And we're going to think, how can it get better? I think that's going to be a great context in which students can have that maturation process of getting, beaten around a little bit and coming through the other side, not only better, but happier.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I saw people use ketchup and mustard and try to draw things, and they looked pretty childish in college, So there's this level of, you can experiment in your sketchbook, but when you come to class, you better be ready to explain why you chose ketchup and mustard and how is that really going to come through as looking good and creating illusions or creating whatever it is you were trying to create. So that is a cool part of it, because you can't take the experimentation too far.
Ooh.
In the wrong direction.
Yeah.
No food finger painting in my class.
I can imagine first day of class. That's the first thing you said.
I've seen this.
Well, thank you, baby. I'll
You're welcome,
give you a kiss afterwards, after we come off the live. Thanks to everybody who's been watching. Thank you for your questions and comments, and we'll see you for the next one. Bye now.